Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little. We are back with what is going to be the final part of this big $5 review with CzechRaizor. I want to thank you all for being here. If you enjoyed this series, please feel free to share it with your friends. That is by far the most beneficial thing you can do for me because it lets more people know about me. So again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Let's go get to the conclusion of this big $5 win.
Gets through, that's good. Not the bad result, it's okay. Alright, pocket sixes. Let's see what happened with pocket sixes. Yeah, that would have been too tight. I wouldn't like it. I would not like for folding sixes here.
I like the open jam.
Clear.
I like the open jam mainly because, again, we're back to a somewhat short stack, and if we raise, we kind of have to call off with pocket sixes. So I like the shove. Seems perfectly fine to me. Also, you can be much more inclined to shove a little bit wider whenever you are the shortest stack as you are here. Obviously, that kind of goes out the window whenever lots of people are short, but here you are short by a long way. And also, short is relative. It's almost like in quotation marks, because if you have a 30 big blind stack, of course, you don't just be open jamming with pocket sixes. That would be way too many chips. But with this stack size, it is perfectly fine.
Spot to shove, and it gets through. It's okay. Pocket tens, straightforward. Best possible situation where now I'm facing raise and a call. And I managed to win another flip with King Queen. It is a really, really strange play. That makes me think that this guy's a weaker egg or weaker player because he's calling from a small blind. He's playing another big stack that could threaten him and put this stack in danger, which is what this is the last thing that he wants to do with another two really short stacks and third shorter stack at the table. Plus, there's a decent risk that I just jam and he would have to call it off. So like calling 15 bigs could hurt him quite a bit, and yeah, King Queen off is not the hand to do it with, in my opinion.
So this is an interesting spot. I actually do not mind his call from the small blind, and I much prefer his call than 3-betting. And I think King Queen is way too good to fold, given the initial raiser is playing a lot of pots, right? Going back to your heads up display, it's he's playing roughly 60-ish% of his hands, give or take a little bit. So we have no reason to think that he is snug by any means. And of course he can threaten the guy's stack, but with top pair, second kicker, you're often happy enough playing a big pot because your opponent is very active and aggressive. And if you do win this big pot, you just win the tournament for the most part. So I am definitely okay with the pre-flop call with the King Queen. Once it gets jammed on, it's probably close. I think I would probably fold versus you, mainly because you've been somewhat tight. I would definitely fold versus the player to your left because he has also been somewhat tight. But this is a spot where I don't really fault his play.
So I think it's a pretty significant mistake on his part. But the outcome is good. I like the outcome. Happy with it. Don't think this is a spot for me to start 3-betting light. But he's a big stack and a guy who is likely to 4-bet light and play back. Alright, and we have an elimination. Yeah, now we can see how wide this guy is, but it doesn't. It's still in my opinion doesn't make a good 3-bet with ace-4 off in this spot. But Fred Plima should have been shoving his ace-9 suited. It's just too strong of a hand. But that only confirms how I was viewing him as an opponent, how nitty I think he was, how tight and risk-averse of a player he was. So the kind of I think advocates raise folding, being like 10, 12, 11 big blinds deep from small to big. I think that kind of, is a good argument for raise folding when he's not comfortable getting it in with ace-9 suited. He's very, very, very wide open. He's opening over a short sample, small sample, but 60, 33, 83, 56, 50. So he's opening like 50, 60, 50, 60, 70%, and not being really positional aware. So he's opening throughout positions over 50%. That's a huge amount of full equity, so I should have shoved it in.
I agree.
Best possible result for me.
But again, notice we have this guy raising 10-6 offsuit, and you're suggesting the small blind there fold King Queen, which should be in great shape versus his incredibly wide range. So don't fall into the habit of thinking that just because the guy is a big stack, that the medium stacks must stay out of his way. If his range is so wide open to the point that he's playing 10-6 offsuit under the gun, You just have to be willing to play hands like king queen. You got to be a little bit more comfortable splashing around. That's what it amounts to.
We are down to 4 players. Right, at this stage I have to open a hand as strong as king 10, and yeah, very likely scenario, very likely outcome. I do not think I can start get a king back here. Or, yeah, very interesting spot, and don't think that this situation anything but folding is good. Or rather, anything but folding would be an ICM suicide, I think.
So, knowing that you are putting yourself into a spot where the small blind, the crazy player has to do to put you in an ICM suicide spot is 3-bet. The question then becomes why open this hand in the first place? And of course, you want to be opening more than only the hands you plan on playing a big pot with, because you want to have some folding range. But I don't think it would be insane just to call there and try to flop a king or a 10. I think if you flop a king or a 10 versus this guy, you're often going to be very happy. So again, I'm a little bit more inclined to call and see flops. Obviously, king 10 is not a good hand that you're typically looking to fold in that scenario. But because this guy is so active, this player in the small blind, I think you have to be a little bit more prepared to splash around versus the guy.
Yeah, okay. I'm quite glad. Still, I think it's too good of a hand to skip, and I have to open a book tens. That's a whole different story. Premium hand, and I get to get a call from big blind. Yeah, expecting to be ahead very high majority of the time. This is the last spot in the world, or last time. Yeah, at least. I should be at least motivated to do something funky or stupid, or which means checking back the flop and not a body bet, and so on and so on. So I did go for a bet, which is on unexpectedly large. I would default to see bet like 35-38%, so it's a little bit larger than my default, I think. Anyway, I remember this, and I get raised. At this point, my opponent is.
Let's actually talk about the flop bet size. I do agree that you want to be betting smaller in this spot. I think as you start betting bigger, you're going to force your opponent to play better. By betting small, you give them the opportunity to stick around with all sorts of junk. And so you definitely want to be betting smaller, probably even something like 175k in this spot.
Polarized. So I guess that like 5x is not completely out of the question, but he has so many ace threes, ace fours, 4-5s, 6-4s, 6-3s, so many gachos or so many random hands that I'm ahead of. And given the size of the pot, when there's already 1.4 million and he's got only 1.9 behind, I think there's a theoretical way to just flat and let him play. But given we are down to 4 people and given the pot size already, I think my only option is to shove. And just if I take down what's in the pot, and I'm quite happy with it. If by any chance he decided to flat like 6s or 7s pre-flop and raise them, there's a chance that he's going to call it off. Maybe, yeah. Anyway, this is the reason for me to shove. I remember that I shoved, and now I'm discussing why. Yeah.
The main reason to shove here is because really, I'm trying to come up with good reasons to shove. The main reason is because the guy put in so many chips to the point where if he does fold out, hands with equity, that's fine. I think, like you said, you have a pretty good idea of the bluffs he should have. Not that he necessarily does, but you have ideas of what he should be check raising with here. And I think you can play pretty well. You're obviously not trying to fold on any turns besides perhaps exactly an ace, because that lets a lot of the gut shots beat you and also 4-3 beats you. So I think you can pretty easily call down on any run out besides exactly an ace. So I like the idea of just calling in this, of just calling, because in this scenario, this guy's probably drawing nearly dead. And if you jam on him, you're going to let him off the hook some portion of the time, which is very, very bad. And given that he folded, he was obviously drawing nearly dead. So you let him get off the hook. People like Phil Hellmuth always discuss how you want to not let your opponent draw to whatever equity they possibly have, because the value of you staying in the tournament is incredibly high, and by shoving, you make it impossible for you to get outdrawn. But I do think you're going to be against the 5 sporadically, And you do get off the hook sometimes when the ace comes and your opponent does have the 5. And I think that your hand is in such good shape to the point where you really don't want to let your opponent fold. I think your hand's just too good here to shove.
It's a pretty significant portion of my stack. It is a very significant pot at this point, being four-handed and just leaving him being half stack, or having half amount of chips that I have, if that makes any sense. Yeah, we are just under pressure from the big stack. This is interesting. I just cannot call it. I cannot be calling it off with ace 9. Yeah, again, this is a question of running hands through hold'em resources or ICM visor, and still, I wonder if we could discuss this like off the top of our heads, whether what the range for call should be here, maybe without consulting ICM visor or hold'em resource first, and then just getting clarification, and just to be absolutely sure.
Well, off the top of my head, I think it's probably something like ace. Well, so the problem is this guy's very loose. And again, I'm not sure if you're trying to find the optimal calling range or the calling range versus this guy. Versus this guy, it's probably something like ace jack or better, maybe ace 10 or better. And then something like pocket 7s or better. King queen suited's probably a fold. Maybe it's close. But that's roughly what I would call it in this spot. And I do think you can be somewhat snug when people are just jamming it all in for 20 big blinds, especially when you have a very reasonable second stack. Also, feel free to analyze any of these situations away from the table. I realize that takes a bunch of time, but I am happy to learn too. If you find spots where I am perhaps suggesting something wrong, or you can quantify why it's wrong, definitely let me know. I'm happy to learn along with everyone else.
What the range should look like, what the range should be, given the ICM and given these stack sizes and price pool, pay jumps and everything. Yeah. I kind of shove and don't want to 3-bet call, and he's opening for 3x, so I have to get out of the way here.
Yeah, I agree with fold there.
Oh, oops. Well, I felt like maybe it's time to mix it up a little, but I'm not sure this hand is good enough. Maybe I had a feeling like I skipped all my early position raises or first position raises, so it's time to mix it up and make it look strong from first position. But it's very, very, very borderline and very possibly bad. Anyway, luckily it just gets through, and I take down the blinds and antes.
So again, this goes back to you making what I guess we can refer to as an image raise, where you are opening wide because you expect the players to give you credit for having a very strong hand because you haven't put a chip in the pot in a little while. And, that's a reasonable thought. The problem is that in this scenario, the guy on the button has a very good stack to 3-bet you and put you in a miserable spot, given the other 2 short stacks. So I would never raise this in this scenario is what it amounts to. And I think it's probably pretty fortunate that you either did not get jammed on by either of these guys or 3-bet by the big stack.
Which is the best possible outcome. Or one of the best outcomes. Alright, I guess fold it. Another interesting one. Another homework. It's definitely plus cheap EV to call here, and I think I can afford it with 4 million. If I had like 2.8, 2.789, and then it would be a lot closer, but at this point I have to call, I'm assuming.
I agree. Calling is the only play that makes sense here. Your opponent's jamming very wide, and your hand is not amazing, but certainly very far ahead of his range. And for that reason, I think you just have to call it off in this scenario.
And this is what I did, and I managed to hold again, and we are down to 3. So that's the last 3 players. Now this is a very, very interesting spot because Theo Hellas could be like shoving basically really, really wide, and I cannot call anything but aces and kings, and I would have to fold ace king, I would have to fold pocket tens, pocket jacks. Yeah, so if he knows that I respect and regard ICM, he could be abusing me really, really well, and just shoving relentlessly and really, really wide, because I would be forced to fold ace king and pocket jacks.
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah. This could have gone both ways in my opinion, and defending's fine, I think.
I like defend as well.
I didn't decide to do anything funky slash stupid, and just getting out of the way and giving him the pot. I think that was a smart thing to do. Alright, last few hands. That's another one for me to defend, yes. Alright, at this point I felt like I have to do something rather than folding on any flop, so I decided to float this. Probably it's marginally bad given the fact that there's no club on this board, and with one club it would have been better. So do you have like a couple of backdoors? At the same time, there's not like a huge amount of draws, and this board should hit my range. So yeah, once another card below 10 falls on the turn, I think he should be giving up, even given his tendencies and frequencies. So I kind of felt like he would be giving up once we get card lower than 10, and yeah, so it would be running the board in a way that I could represent and fire many rivers was my plan. Yeah, it's one of the cards gets checked through.
I am not a fan of this at all. I think that your hand is absolute garbage, and it's fine to fold the bottom of your range. You do not need to feel obligated to make a play just because you have not made a play in a while. And again, of course, going back to the idea that maybe you will be able to get away with it because you haven't done anything in a while, I just don't think that that is mandatory here. I think that your hand is no good, so just fold and be patient. Here you lost 2 big blinds. It's okay to lose 2 big blinds. Again, you don't risk losing a big pot because now this, you're not trying to get a closer stack, closer to Phoebe attack. So I would just call pre-flop and then check fold this board. Check on the turn, you have to bet the river. I would probably bet roughly this size, maybe even a little bit bigger to try to ensure he folds out an 8 or a 10. But at least you executed well on the plan, right? You had a plan, you're executing on it. That's okay. But be careful, because I think this kind of play is completely unnecessary. I actually have a book called Bluffs that came out recently. Nice and elegant title. And it discusses spots where you should and should not be attempting bluffs. And this is one of them that I generally suggest you do not attempt, because you are relying on a few things. First, you need your opponent to fold the river, which may not happen. Also, you need your opponent not to bet the turn, which may or may not happen. So you have to have a few things go right for you for this kind of play to succeed, and I think it just does not happen often enough to show a profit.
And I'm sticking to my plan to fire this type of run out. I chose bet sizing that's not too polarizing, so I could still have like 2-pair combos in my range, which I think I would value bet. Maybe I would value bet a touch smaller, maybe 480, like 460, 70, 80. So maybe I should have gone for a little bit smaller sizing that I think accomplishes the same thing as 550. So like I think 450, 460 does the same thing as 550. And yeah, once my sizing gets too large, I think he might, ironically, he might be inclined to bluff catch with a wider range. So yeah, I prefer like 460 to keep my perceived range wider and to be representing wider range, more 2-pair hands and maybe strong top pair. Yeah, not just straight flushes, not just flushes and 7x.
I don't really know if your sizing matters that too much, as long as you make it kind of small on the river, and I think your sizing was kind of small enough.
Yeah, if it's not like overly aggressive and a little bit smart, he should be like letting me steal some pots maybe. Well, I don't. It is not a bad thing for him to allow me to take down this guy down, because he still would have good advantage going to heads up, and it is a pay jump for him as well. So yeah, but yeah, this is a very right thing for him to do, to abuse my range by shoving, because I cannot call. Like I previously mentioned, my calling range will be like aces and kings, and queens are close, I think. So yeah, for this reason, I should have skipped opening 3-4, because it's not like Theo will give him the pots and will give him the blinder, and then I think he will be opening extremely wide, or at least limb stubbing. So my concern is not that the freebie attack will not get run down by Theo. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with opening, but folding is also fine for the reasons you stated. As long as he's not attacking you, I think you should just raise and keep raising and keep raising. But once he does start attacking you and starts applying pressure to you, then you definitely have to tighten up. So I don't mind the open, but really raising into these two guys who are both pretty aggressive, I'm okay with folding.
Given that situation, I should have skipped this open. I'm pretty sure. I like ISOing because it is not a hand. I got ace blocker. He limps to me. I do not read into that as a strength. There's no dynamics that would indicate I am having a really strong range, and the ace 3 just is ahead of his range and doesn't flop too well. So, and I block aces, so I got ace blocker. So I should go for like 3.5x.
I am a pretty big fan of just checking in the big blind when people limp. I mean, you'd much rather see a free flop than raise and get jammed on. And also, this hand is not particularly amazing. I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong, it's a strong hand, but it's not like it's the nuts, right? So, in this spot, I think you should probably just be happy to check. And I tend to raise with hands that are very strong or very weak, and I don't think this really falls in that category. I'm trying to think other benefits to raising. I mean, the main benefit is you steal the pot sometimes, but you're in position, and hopefully you'll play well enough to where you're going to realize your equity a ton. And also you'll be able to underrepresent your hand on a lot of flops, because a lot of people will think that you don't have very many aces in your range if you do check.
I like raising to 3.5x here with this specific hand, giving these reasons. Anyway, we are to the flop. My hand is somewhat disguised and very, very underwrapped. He should not expect me to have ace pretty much ever. Now, very seldom. I could have some kings. I could have like jack 10, queen 10, maybe king 10, queen jack. Middle Broadway cards that are not good enough to raise and face 3-bets, but just good to see the flop with. So all these middle Broadway cards are in my range, but not too many aces. Because the weak aces are good to ISO for the reasons that I mentioned, and the stronger ones obviously are like ace 10 plus is good to 3-bet, 5-bet for value.
So again, I generally disagree that you want to be raising those hands. I just don't think it's necessary. I think it's fine to check and see a flop. You'll actually see this a lot from very good heads-up players are often just checking and seeing flops whenever their opponents do limp. Obviously, they're out of position heads up, but you don't want to do anything that lets your opponent play well. And I think whenever you raise with a marginal made hand, you're going to make them fold out a lot of their worse made hands and stay in with most of their better made hands. So, well, hands, I guess, and nothing's made pre-flop. I think by raising, you get him out with a lot of junk, and I think you don't care if he sticks around with junk, given you're in position, and you'll hopefully be able to play your hand very well after the flop.
Okay, less than 20 hands left in this video and left in the tournament. I decided to 3-bet with suited ace and ace blocker. The thing is that Theo, if he suspects me to be 3-betting this type of range, he could just shove again. But I don't know, I just didn't feel like he would do it too often. I'm not sure, not entirely sure if I have enough information to back it up, this thought. And yeah, freebie was opening a decent amount, 43% buttons, so that's quite a lot, that's quite wide. And okay, hope it doesn't crash coming to the last 10 minutes of my video. Yeah, and I managed to take it down. That's good. That's a good result. Yeah. Getting away with somewhat lighter open.
I like the idea of 3-betting in that spot, mainly just because your hand is a very good 3-betting hand. Obviously, like you said, the player in the big blind could get out of line and exploit you just by shoving super wide. But I think you're going to find that most of the time those players just don't. So I don't think you have too much to be worried about. Of course, you're not loving it when you get jammed on, but I think the odds you get jammed on there are somewhat low.
I have to defend here. There's no point in 3-betting. There's no point in, as the hand is very strong to fold. I'm flopping quite well, so I decided to check call.
So check call on the flop I think is good and standard. I like that. Now what do we do on the turn? The turn is obviously a bad card. We check and the opponent bets again. Given this guy is playing so many pots, I think that you have to stick around again. I mean, you have an open-ended straight draw, right? So worst case, you're drawing to that. I just don't really see a reason why you should fold here. Obviously, you could be beat, but just because you could be beat does not mean you should easily fold. So yeah, I'm definitely calling here. I think your hand is certainly good enough. If you're folding this, again, you always want to ask yourself, if I'm folding this, what else am I folding? And I think if you're folding this, you're folding, I mean, pretty much everything, right? Because here you have second pair and a straight draw. In order for you to have 2-pair or better, I mean, quite often 2-pair or better is going to raise on the flop, and it's kind of hard for you to have an ace given you check call the flop. So if you're folding this, you're folding pretty much everything besides, I mean, the nuts that you decide to slow play. So you had to have the nuts and decide to slow play the nuts. And I think that's just not going to happen very often at all. So I do not like this fold at all.
This is very interesting. This is him using the chip advantage really, and icing pressure really well. And no matter what he has, if he does this bet with entire range, it's really good for him. It's really good because he puts so many hands that I just call flops. Call on the flop under significant and huge amount of pressure. And exactly, I have to fold so many top pairs and so many good hands that what.
See, I'm not convinced you have to fold because we know this guy's range is very wide, right? It's not like this guy's a nit. So given he is very wide, and it's not like he's putting you all in, right? It's not like he's just jamming the turn for all of it. You can easily call here and then call on a lot of rivers too, really, given how completely aggressive this player is and how he should be very aggressive versus you. So do not think that you just have to play super tight because you don't want to go broke or whatever. I don't think you're going broke in this hand too often.
Onto him. This is what played. Especially when he had like jaw, maybe like hands like gut shot. It's a really good sizing. I like it. Yeah, not completing, not raising. Good. Okay, yeah, I should have skipped. Yeah. Mistake. It is a fault. I should have skipped this one. Okay. And there's another 3-bet pot. Yeah, it takes it down. I didn't decide to 3-bet. That's good. Given the history. Okay, this is good fold. I do not defend. That's good as well. I do not get involved with Jack 4. Hopefully folding this one. Ace 4 suited and calling this shove. Oh. Yeah.
This is another spot where I think you can certainly deviate from whatever Nash says. If you think this guy is jamming pretty much every time it folds to him, then I definitely like your call. If he's calling sometimes, folding sometimes, jamming sometimes, I think your call becomes much more speculative. But I don't think this is insane, and I think I probably would have made the same call in your shoes, but it's close. It's closer than it looks.
Tricky one as well. Really close. Really tough. Really hard. Yeah, question of running this one through ICMizer. Anyway, decided to call off, and I was behind and got the fortunate run out and managed to split his hand. Yeah, it feels like I could have skipped this one and called like ace 8 off and ace 7, 8, maybe ace 9, ace 9, ace 10 and ace 9 suited. Yeah, it doesn't feel like I need to call off here. It doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel good.
I think it's fine to call off here. I really don't think it's that bad. It's certainly high risk, but again, we're trying to win the poker tournament, and the way you win the poker tournament is by taking some of these marginally high risk spots.
Alright, so the short stack gets run down a bit. That's good. I didn't open this a6 off. Alright. Yeah, I have to take a spot. Yeah, I could occasionally run into big hand, but given his range of 60% plus, or around 60%, I just have to rejam and take what's offered. Take a spot, and I managed to hold in. We are heads up. At this point, there's a deal discussed, so we discuss a deal, and so I do not think there's too much point in running the last hands. We play like 3-4 hands and then just flipped it pre-flop, and that's the end of the story and end of the tournament. So I hope you enjoyed watching some action, which was not always the best one possible, but it is the way to learn from your own mistakes or even somebody else's mistakes. Okay, so let me know what you think, and let's discuss some interesting spots. Good luck to everybody. So Victor signing off. Bye bye.
So it's kind of interesting that you decided to chop with this guy. Given the way this player had been playing, I do not think I would ever chop with him. And the main reason for that is because he seems to be just blatantly bonkers aggressive. And if someone is blatantly bonkers aggressive, you can just play a somewhat good, tight aggressive strategy, and you will probably end up beating them. You may feel like you don't have a lot of play, or maybe you wanted to not have to, quote unquote, flip for a lot of money. But I think in this is a scenario where I would definitely not chop. All in all, though, you played very well. There are very few spots where I looked at this and said, oh my God, that's horrible, right? And that's very good. It's a very good thing. So congrats on that. Also, I'm proud of you because you're doing a lot of good work. You know what I mean? It's not like you're just resting and trying to, brag about how good you are. You're working hard to improve your game and to get better as a poker player. So congrats on that. I think that's definitely great. I do think you should probably experiment with being a little bit more splashy. I think that's going to be a mandatory adjustment you need to make as you move up in stakes and play against stronger players. I also think you should probably be a little bit more inclined to 3-bet with some blocker hands. There were a few spots where you did 3-bet the ace-x offsuit hands and some spots where you did not. And yeah, I think you probably want to be just a little bit more aggressive in those scenarios. So those are some spots that I would immediately tell you to work on. But all in all, I feel like you were playing very well. I think you played great, and you're certainly providing a good example of how to play to everyone out there. So again, thank you to everyone for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. This has been Jonathan Little, and I'll talk to you next time.